The quiet drizzle fell gently over the small town of Cedar Grove, cloaking its streets in a soft, damp veil. The amber glow of the old street lamps flickered over the wet pavement, casting blurred reflections that shimmered like silent tears in the dim light. At first glance, Cedar Grove seemed peaceful. A quiet town nestled beside a shallow river, with its short streets lined by red-roofed houses and cozy diners where neighbors greeted each other by name. But beneath this serene surface, there were unseen scars, quiet wounds that never fully healed. In this town, justice was often a distant dream, and fairness remained a rare luxury. A sleek black SUV rolled slowly along the slick asphalt, its tires hissing softly as they cut through shallow puddles beneath the fading streetlights. Inside sat Maya Carter, a 45-year-old woman, clad in a crisp military uniform, the 3 silver stars on her shoulders, dimly catching the light. Her hands, clad in soft leather gloves, rested firmly on the steering wheel, steady and unwavering. Outside the window, raindrops traced lazy patterns down the glass, but Maya's gaze was sharp, penetrating through the haze. She was no stranger to hardship or prejudice. She had faced danger head-on distant battlefields, navigating chaos with courage and skill to rise through the ranks to become one of the U.S. Army's most respected female colonels. Yet today, as she drove back through this small town, her heart beat with a strange tension. A quiet unease gnawed at her, a warning that something unseen but inevitable was approaching. The streets were nearly empty, save for the steady patter of rain on rooftops and the Othio Dan I đã thống nhất và hướng dẫn trong file upload. Trình bày và ngắt nghĩ phù hợp để chuyển đổi text to speech để tăng cảm xúc khi nghe. Không có các ký tự là tránh gây nhiều khi chuyển thể. TT-sational, distant hum of passing cars. The air hung heavy thick with the weight of unspoken histories and silent judgments. Maya pulled up to a familiar spot, a small, modest diner named Camille's. It was a local staple, a place where people gathered for a warm meal and fleeting connection. But for Maya, this place was far from a sanctuary. Though she had visited before, the warm glow of the diner's yellow lights now felt like a spotlight highlighting her difference. She stepped out of the vehicle and into the quiet warmth of Camille's, each footstep measured yet resolute. Immediately, dozens of eyes turned toward her. Not welcoming eyes, but ones filled with suspicion, hesitation, and unspoken bias. In that moment, Maya was not a high-ranking officer, not a decorated soldier. To them, she was just a woman in a uniform, a black woman who did not belong. Behind the counter, Camille, a middle-aged white woman with curly hair and keen eyes, watched Maya carefully. Unlike the others, Camille did not look away. There was a quiet respect in her gaze, a silent acknowledgement that Maya's presence mattered. Beside Camille stood her 16-year-old daughter, Emily, clutching a smartphone with steady hands, ready to capture whatever might unfold. Emily understood the power of witness. Sometimes, all it took was a recording to bring light to darkness and hope to those fighting to be seen. Maya settled at a corner table near the window, removing her gloves slowly, her strong hands betraying the calm exterior. She cradled a warm cup of coffee, as though it were an anchor, a small comfort amid the heavy atmosphere pressing down on her. Around her, the diner seemed frozen in an uneasy silence. The tension was palpable, a heavy cloak that muffled voices and hardened hearts. Outside, the rain continued to fall softly, creating ripples and puddles, like cracks forming in the armor of a society long resistant to change. Maya knew she was not alone in feeling this weight, but the isolation she sensed here was profound. It was the loneliness of those who carry the burden of injustice not as strangers, but as lived reality. Her story was only just beginning here, but the signs of the battle ahead were already etched in the air. This fight was not just with the people gathered in this small diner, but with an entire system riddled with prejudice and abuse of power. And in this moment, surrounded by watchful eyes and silent judgment, Maya was preparing to stand firm, not only for herself, but for countless others whose voices had long been ignored. As the golden light flickered over the 3 stars on her uniform, in the quiet storm of the night, Maya's strength stirred like a flame, refusing to be extinguished. Her story had begun, and it was destined to make waves far beyond this small town's borders. Before we get started, drop a comment below telling us where you're tuning in from and what time it is. We'd love to know how far this story has traveled and who it has touched along the way. All right, let's jump right into the story. Maya Carter was more than just a woman in uniform. She was the embodiment of strength and resilience forged through battles few could imagine. At 45 years old, she carried 3 silver stars on her shoulders, a symbol of respect and authority in the United States Army. But to many, she wasn't a high-ranking officer. She was just another black woman someone society often pushed to the margins. As Maya stepped out of Camille's diner, her gait was steady and deliberate. Each step was measured yet filled with determination. Her eyes never wavered, refusing to show fear or seek approval. She was fully aware of the countless eyes on her, watching, judging. But she wouldn't let their stares make her falter. The authority in her every movement wasn't arrogance. It was discipline honed over years of military service. Standing about 5 feet 6 inches tall, Maya's frame was strong, but not imposing. Her face bore the sharp lines of experience marked by years of challenges and perseverance. Her deep brown eyes shone with intelligence and an unshakable resolve. Her hair was neatly pulled back, a reflection of her meticulous nature and seriousness. Though well worn from many washes, her navy blue uniform remained impeccably pressed with those 3 silver stars, catching the streetlights as she moved. But the pressure Maya carried went beyond her appearance. Being a black woman in the military, a traditionally strict and often discriminatory institution, meant she had to work twice, sometimes 3 times harder than her white peers. Every achievement was not just a personal victory, but a testament to countless black women striving to be recognized in spaces that weren't always welcoming. Her fellow soldiers often shared stories of being overlooked, questioned, or underestimated simply because of their skin color. But Maya never let those obstacles break her spirit. She reminded herself daily that true strength comes not only from outward toughness, but from an unyielding spirit. Just a day after returning from a 6-month overseas deployment, Maya received an invitation to visit Cedar Grove, the small town where she grew up. She knew this trip wasn't about rest or reunion. It was a place where ghosts of the past still lingered, where suspicion and exclusion awaited her, and perhaps even open hostility. As Maya entered the small diner, a rugged, middle-aged man glanced up sharply. His face was weathered, his brows furrowed, and his gaze cold. Wade Lawson, the town's police chief, wasn't fond of Maya's presence. His broad frame and confident posture conveyed a man used to power and control. He scanned Maya from head to toe, his eyes reflecting distrust and discomfort. Maya took a seat across from him. For a moment, silence hung thick in the air, charged and heavy. Wade broke it first, his voice low and loaded with implication. "Colonel Carter, it's hard to believe you'd show up here. Maybe you think you're above all of us now." Maya met his gaze without hesitation. Her voice was calm even, but carried a sharp edge. "I'm just here for dinner, Wade. Nothing more." "Dinner, huh? Around here, folks don't usually see people like you walking through the door." "You realize that, right?" Wade sneered. His eyes locked on Maya's uniform. The tension in the diner thickened, all eyes focused on the exchange. Maya understood that every word, every gesture would be scrutinized, but she had no intention of retreating or changing herself to appease anyone. "What makes you think you have the right to be here?" Wade pressed his tone, hardening into a challenge. Standing up, Maya faced him squarely. Her voice rang with authority. "I am Colonel Maya Carter, an officer in the United States Army. I have the right to be here, just like anyone else." A moment of stunned silence followed. Wade muttered more to himself than her. "You're something else, but in my eyes, you're just different." Maya offered a faint, knowing smile. She turned her attention to Emily, the 16-year-old girl, holding her phone steadily, silently, recording every moment. "Thank you for being here," she said softly. A quiet encouragement, as much as gratitude. Emily nodded, her eyes resolute. Maya knew the road ahead would be long and difficult. She understood that only through unwavering conviction and the power of truth could she break down the invisible barriers of prejudice and discrimination. Every step Maya took, however small, on the damp streets of Cedar Grove, was a giant leap for justice and respect, battles she had fought her entire life to win. Maya pushed open the door to the small-town cafe, the familiar chime announcing her arrival, slicing through the quiet hum of conversation. Instantly, the atmosphere shifted. Every head in the room turned, every eye fixed upon her. Not with welcome, but with suspicion, some with outright disdain. The air thickened heavy with unspoken judgment. She felt the weight of those gazes as keenly as if they were physical blows. It was a silent assault, subtle, yet relentless, a barrage of microaggressions that punctuated the daily lives of so many Black Americans. The small scoffs, the barely concealed grimaces, the sideways glances that seemed to ask, "What is she doing here? Who does she think she is?" Maya's posture didn't falter. Her shoulders squared, chin lifted slightly. Steady and calm. There was a quiet dignity in her stride, a measured confidence that only years of perseverance could forge. Yet beneath that calm surface was an undercurrent of pain. Pain born from a lifetime of being othered, of constantly having to prove her worth in places where acceptance was not freely given. The cafe was modest, with faded wooden tables and walls adorned with pictures of local history. But for Maya, it had become an arena where invisible battles were fought daily. She remembered a moment from years ago, a small but telling encounter at a grocery store. A clerk, seeing her approach, had hurriedly stepped aside, mumbling something about a special delivery. The message was clear. She was not expected there, not in that role, not as herself. These everyday slights were a tapestry of exclusion, woven seamlessly into the fabric of ordinary life. At a nearby table, a man quietly whispered to his companion, casting a quick glance Maya's way. Their conversation faltered as she passed, but the thinly veiled resentment lingered like a shadow. Maya caught it all the way. Their eyes flicked away when she held their gaze. The tension in their shoulders, as if her very presence unsettled them. Yet in the midst of that cold crowd, there were a few glimmers of something different. A young woman behind the counter gave Maya a brief, encouraging smile, a small beacon of warmth in an otherwise chilly room. It reminded Maya of the importance of allies, even when they were few and far between. Her feet carried her to a vacant table by the window. As she sat down, the faint murmur of whispered comments trailed behind her like an echo. Maya allowed herself a slow breath, the kind that steadied her nerves and anchored her resolve. She knew this was more than just a simple visit to a cafe. It was a confrontation with a community's unspoken prejudices, a microcosm of the larger systemic issues that shadowed her entire life. The contrast between her quiet confidence and the palpable isolation imposed by those around her was stark. She was both visible and invisible, seen but not truly recognized. It was the paradox of existence for many who live at the intersection of race and identity in America. Maya recalled another instance during a business meeting where a colleague repeatedly interrupted her, dismissing her ideas without reason. When she spoke up about it, the response was a dismissive shrug. "I didn't mean anything by it," they said, unaware or unwilling to acknowledge the subtle bias embedded in their behavior. These moments, seemingly insignificant on their own, accumulated like small cuts wounds that shaped how Maya navigated every room she entered. Despite it all, Maya's spirit remained unbroken. She understood that confronting these daily indignities required a resilience born not only of personal strength, but of a commitment to change the narratives written about people like her. Her presence here, in this small cafe, was a testament to that determination. As she reached for her cup of coffee, Maya's eyes met those of a young boy seated with his mother nearby. The boy's gaze was curious, unguarded, a stark contrast to the wary looks of the adults. For a fleeting moment, Maya saw hope in that innocent glance, a reminder that the future could be different. But for now, the room remained heavy with tension. Conversations hushed as Maya settled in the quiet hum of discomfort hanging in the air. She knew that breaking through this barrier of silent exclusion would take time, and countless acts of courage, like the one she was embodying at that very moment. In that cafe, amid the cold stares and whispered judgments, Maya held fast to her dignity. Her story was not just her own. It was a chapter in a larger struggle for recognition, respect, and justice. And as she sat there poised and unyielding, she silently vowed to keep pushing forward one small victory at a time. Wiped her hands on a faded apron as she watched Maya Carter enter her diner. At 52, Camille carried the lines of experience on her face, soft wrinkles that spoke of years spent managing this modest establishment in Cedar Grove. Her pale blue eyes held a quiet understanding, a compassion born from witnessing the town's slow shifts and unspoken struggles. She had seen people come and go, some welcomed with open arms, others met with cold stares, like the ones Maya faced today. Camille's diner was more than just a place to eat. It was a crossroads, a small haven where stories overlapped, some spoken, many left unsaid. Behind the counter, Camille observed the scene unfold with a gentle steadiness. She noticed the hesitation in the patron's eyes, the stiff shoulders, the quick glances exchanged when Maya walked in. But unlike most, Camille did not turn away. Instead, she felt a silent promise to bear witness. Beside her stood Emily, Camille's 16-year-old daughter. Emily was a product of her time, tech-savvy, aware, and unafraid to challenge the status quo. In her hands was her smartphone, ready to record anything that might unfold. While Camille's empathy was quiet and reflective, Emily's approach was active and immediate. For the younger generation, documenting injustice was not just a choice, but a responsibility. The contrast between mother and daughter was striking. Camille's years had taught her the power of patience and subtle acts of kindness. She believed in planting seeds, slowly trusting that change would come with time. Emily, on the other hand, lived in an era where every moment could be broadcast worldwide in seconds, where silence was complicity, and speaking out could spark movements. Camille leaned slightly forward, her voice soft but firm. You see, Emily, sometimes just watching, just being present. That's the first step. Before people can listen, they need to be seen. Emily nodded, eyes fixed on Maya, fingers poised over the screen. I'm ready, Mom. If something happens, I won't let it go unnoticed. This unspoken pact between them highlighted the evolving landscape of social justice, where generations and perspectives converged. Camille represented a measured hope, a belief in quiet perseverance. Emily embodied urgency and the power of technology, a new way to hold the world accountable. As Maya settled into her seat, Camille approached her table with a gentle smile. Welcome back, Maya. It's good to see you here. Maya returned the smile, gratitude flickering in her eyes. Thank you, Camille. It means a lot. The brief exchange was a lifeline in a sea of tension, a reminder that even in places shadowed by prejudice, pockets of support existed. Camille's presence, steady and reassuring, contrasted sharply with the coldness elsewhere. She was a witness, a keeper of stories, and her quiet acknowledgement was a subtle act of defiance against the surrounding hostility. Throughout the evening, Camille continued her watchful role, serving customers, with the same warmth, but always attentive to the undercurrents in the room. Emily stayed close, phone in hand, capturing moments that might otherwise slip away unnoticed. This mother-daughter duo embodied the crucial truth that recognition is the foundation of change. Without acknowledgement, injustice festers in silence. But when eyes open even quietly, the path toward understanding and progress begins. As the night deepened and shadows stretched across the diner's wooden floors, Camille and Emily stood as quiet sentinels. Their actions, though different in form, converged in purpose to ensure that Maya's story would not be erased, that the truth would find its way to those willing to listen. In that small cafe, amid whispered judgments and wary stares, the simple act of watching, recording, and caring planted the seeds for something greater. A movement born from recognition and courage, ready to challenge the old patterns and carve out space for justice. Maya sat quietly at the corner table by the window, the dim light casting soft shadows across her face. The subtle aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the faint hum of conversation, but her senses were tuned to something far more acute, the weight of the room's tension pressing down on her like a heavy fog. Around her, muffled whispers and the occasional clink of cutlery barely registered. Maya's world had narrowed to the steady rhythm of her own breath and the battle raging silently within. She inhaled deeply, drawing the cool, slightly bitter scent of her black coffee into her lungs. Her chest rose and fell in measured cadence, a deliberate attempt to ground herself amid the storm of unspoken judgments swirling in the air. Each breath was an anchor, a lifeline to the calm she needed to maintain. The heat of the cup warmed her hands, offering a small comfort against the chill of the room's cold stares. Maya's thoughts flickered through the moments leading up to this one. The cautious glances, the stiffened shoulders, the barely disguised suspicion she knew these well. They were familiar shadows that had trailed her since her earliest days in the military. Yet tonight felt different. Tonight, the quiet storm was gathering, threatening to break in ways that might shatter more than just her evening. She felt the eyes on her like invisible fingers, tracing the edges of her armor, probing for weaknesses. The weight of those gazes wasn't just an abstract concept. It was palpable, sinking into her skin, stirring an ancient and weary part of her soul. It was a reminder that no matter how many battles she had won on distant fields, the fight for dignity and respect at home was just as fierce and often more exhausting. Maya's fingers curled tightly around the cup knuckles, whitening slightly, a subtle but telling sign of the tension coursing through her veins. Yet her face remained composed, a mask of serenity sculpted by years of discipline. Inside a quiet fire burned anger at the injustice, frustration at the familiar pattern of exclusion, but also a deep, unwavering resolve. She reflected on the paradox of her existence, a leader respected by many, yet constantly reminded that her skin marked her as other. The dissonance between the rank she held and the treatment she received was a bitter pill swallowed daily. But surrender was not an option. Her mind rehearsed the conversation she might have to face soon. The questions that could be asked, the accusations that might be leveled. Maya knew that controlling her emotions would be her greatest weapon. To give in to anger or fear would only feed the narrative her detractors wanted to impose. She closed her eyes briefly, picturing the calm she had cultivated over years of grueling training, breathing exercises, mindfulness techniques, moments of silent reflection. These tools were as vital as her military training, allowing her to project strength even when her spirit ached beneath the surface. Opening her eyes, Maya scanned the room once more, noting the subtle shifts in posture, the quick exchanges behind cupped hands. The tension was a living thing, and she was its center. But she was not intimidated. Instead, she embraced the stillness within a quiet command that radiated outward like ripples on water. In this charged atmosphere, Maya embodied the essence of leadership poise under pressure. Her composed exterior was not a shield of detachment, but a deliberate choice to maintain control in a moment where losing it could mean losing much more. She sipped her coffee slowly, letting the bitter warmth steady her nerves. The act was both grounding and symbolic, a reminder that even amidst chaos, there could be moments of peace. Maya's breathing deepened each inhale and exhale, a silent mantra. She wasn't just preparing to eat. She was preparing for the challenges ahead. Every ounce of her being was focused on staying present, on channeling the storm into calm determination. This moment of quiet before the inevitable confrontation was a testament to her strength. It showed that true power wasn't loud or aggressive. It was measured, deliberate, and rooted in the ability to master oneself when the world threatened to unravel. As the cafe's muted light flickered softly, Maya sat tall and unwavering. A beacon of resilience in a sea of judgment. Her breath steady, her mind clear, she was ready to face whatever came next with the dignity and authority of a true commander. The diner door swung open once again, and the bell's sharp chime sliced through the tense silence like a sudden crack of thunder. All heads instinctively turned toward the entrance where Wade Lawson stepped inside. The local police chief was a man in his late 40s, broad-shouldered and tall, with a square jaw shadowed by a day-old beard. His expression was unreadable at first glance, calm, almost indifferent, but beneath the surface lurked a simmering current of suspicion and authority. Wade's eyes locked onto Maya immediately, a cool calculation flickering through his gaze. He moved with deliberate purpose, each step measured as if marking his territory. There was no warmth in his approach, no hint of welcome, only the sharp edges of judgment and mistrust. His presence altered the room's atmosphere, thickening the already charged air with the unmistakable tension of an impending confrontation. He paused just a few feet from Maya's table, hands resting lightly on his belt, fingers twitching almost imperceptibly, a subtle sign of readiness, perhaps a silent warning. His lips curled into a faint, tight smile, not one of kindness, but of cold amusement, as if daring her to challenge his authority. "You're quite the sight," Colonel Wade said, voice low but firm, edged with irony. "Didn't expect to see you here tonight. Thought someone with your rank might avoid a place like this." Maya met his gaze steadily, refusing to give an inch. "I'm here for a meal, Chief. Nothing more." Wade's eyes narrowed slightly. "A meal, huh?" Around here, folks tend to notice when someone doesn't quite fit the usual picture, especially when they wear that uniform. He gestured vaguely at her military jacket. "You sure you belong?" His tone wasn't just questioning, it was accusatory. The unspoken message hung thick in the air. "You don't belong here. You're an outsider." Those small, seemingly insignificant gestures and words were more than personal jabs. They were reflections of a deeper systemic problem. The microaggressions Maya faced in this diner were echoes of the widespread abuse of power that permeates law enforcement agencies across the country. Wade embodied the harsh reality many have confronted, where authority is wielded not to protect and serve, but to intimidate and control, often along lines of race and class. Behind Wade, a few patrons shifted uncomfortably in their seats, some averting their eyes, others exchanging furtive glances. Maya noticed, but did not let it distract her. She understood that Wade's presence was both a threat and a performance, a display of dominance meant to unsettle her and anyone who might stand with her. Wade's gaze flicked momentarily to Emily, who remained silent but alert, phone raised and ready. The police chief's lips tightened, a flicker of irritation crossing his features before he masked it with practiced neutrality. "You're lucky I'm in a good mood," Wade continued, voice dropping to a quieter, more menacing tone, "because I could make this a lot more difficult for you." His hand briefly tapped the holster at his side, a reminder of the power he held. Tangible and intimidating. Maya leaned forward slightly, her voice steady, but resolute. "I'm here as a citizen and an officer. I expect to be treated with the same respect any other person in this town deserves." Wade laughed, a short, harsh sound. "Respect is earned around here, not given because of some fancy rank." He straightened, scanning the room as if looking for allies. "People around here know who's really in charge." That statement hung heavy, a veiled threat wrapped in local pride. It was the language of control, of maintaining the status quo through fear and intimidation. Maya took a deep breath, summoning the calm that had carried her through countless battles. Respect is a right, not a privilege, and abuse of power is what you should be afraid of. The room held its breath. Wade's eyes bore into hers, a storm of emotions hidden behind a mask of authority. For a moment, the tension between them was palpable, an unspoken battle of wills. Then, with a dismissive nod, Wade stepped back, his expression unreadable once more. "We'll see about that," he muttered, before turning away and heading toward the counter. As he moved, the subtle shifts in his demeanor, the slight tightening of his jaw. The quickened pace betrayed the unease beneath his controlled exterior. Wade Lawson was a man accustomed to command, yet confronted now with a challenge that unsettled even his hardened resolve. For Maya, this encounter was a stark reminder of the battles she continued to face, not just on distant fields of war, but in everyday moments where power and prejudice collided. Wade's cold suspicion, his small acts of intimidation, were symptoms of a larger issue, a system where those meant to uphold justice sometimes perpetuated injustice. But Maya's spirit was unbroken. Each challenge, each act of defiance added fuel to her determination. She would not be cowed by Wade Lawson or the shadows he represented. In that small diner under the watchful eyes of a skeptical town and a suspicious police chief, Maya Carter stood firm. A beacon of resilience in the face of systemic abuse, and the fight was far from over. The air in the cafe thickened as Maya Carter and Wade Lawson found themselves standing face to face, mere feet apart. Neither spoke at first. The silence stretched between them charged and heavy, more telling than any argument or shout could ever be. It was a quiet battle, waged in glances and unspoken words, each one carrying weight far beyond the surface. Maya's gaze was steady and unwavering. Her eyes held a calm confidence born from years of experience and hard-earned authority. She stood tall, shoulders back, embodying a presence that demanded respect without raising her voice. In that silence, Maya was saying everything I am here. I belong. I will not be intimidated. Across from her, Wade's expression was more complex. His eyes darted briefly, betraying an undercurrent of unease beneath his stern exterior. The man who had entered the room with a mask of cold control was now revealing cracks, subtle but unmistakable. His jaw clenched ever so slightly, a sign of the tension gripping him. The silence was swallowing him, exposing the doubt he worked hard to hide. This moment suspended between them was a clash of wills communicated without a single spoken word. Maya's steady calm was a shield and a sword, all at once. Wade's silence spoke volumes about his struggle to maintain authority in a situation that unsettled him more than he was willing to admit. Around them, the cafe seemed to fade into the background. The other patrons, sensing the electric tension, fell quiet, as if the very walls were holding their breath. Every subtle movement, every blink, every shift in posture was amplified, telling a story as rich and complex as any conversation could. Maya understood that this silence was as much a battlefield as any confrontation. Sometimes, the absence of words was the most powerful statement one could make. It was an unyielding refusal to engage on terms set by others. By holding her ground without speaking, she refused to let Wade's implied threats and biases define the moment. For Wade, the silence was a test, his internal storm, clashing with the facade of control he projected. He was caught between asserting dominance and confronting an unspoken fear that Maya's presence and strength challenged the very foundation of his authority. This silent standoff carried lessons far beyond the walls of the diner. It illustrated how power can be contested not only through words or actions, but through the quiet resilience of presence. Maya's unspoken defiance was a declaration that sometimes standing firm in silence speaks louder than any shouted protest. After what felt like an eternity, Wade finally broke the silence, not with words of confrontation, but with a reluctant nod. It was an acknowledgement, begrudging and incomplete, that Maya was not someone to be dismissed lightly. Maya met his nod with a faint knowing smile, a silent victory in a battle fought without noise. The tension in the room began to ease, replaced by a quiet respect that neither of them voiced, but both recognized. In that charged silence, both Maya and Wade learned something profound, that sometimes the most powerful battles are those fought in the spaces between words, where strength and vulnerability coexist and true courage is revealed. The calm that had briefly settled over the diner shattered like glass when Wade Lawson returned to Maya's table with a different look in his eyes. A hard, uncompromising edge that sent a ripple of unease through the room. His earlier restrained demeanor was gone, replaced by the unmistakable authority of a man ready to enforce his will without hesitation. Without warning, Wade stepped directly in front of Maya, blocking her path with an unyielding stance. His voice dropped to a low, commanding tone that brooked no argument. "Ma'am, I'm placing you under arrest." Maya's eyes widened slightly, but she did not flinch. On what grounds, she asked calmly, meeting his gaze head-on. Her voice was steady, but beneath it simmered a controlled fire of disbelief and indignation. She had her papers' official military identification proof of her lawful presence. This was not some misunderstanding. Wade ignored the question. "You're coming with me. Cooperate, and this will be over quickly." Around them, the diner's usual patrons froze, the tension thick enough to suffocate. Emily's phone remained poised, silently recording the unfolding scene. Camille watched from behind the counter, worry etching her features. Maya's mind raced, but her face remained composed. Years of training kicked in the drills of compliance under duress, the careful balance between asserting rights and avoiding escalation. She stood slowly, hands raised in a gesture of peaceful cooperation, but never lowering her eyes. "This is wrong," she said quietly but firmly. "I have done nothing illegal. I have every right to be here." Wade's expression hardened further. "I don't need to explain myself to you. You're under arrest." His hands moved swiftly, grabbing at her wrists as if to shackle her freedom before it could resist. Maya tensed the cold steel of the handcuffs waiting to close around her wrists. Her body remembered every similar moment, every time she had been judged, wound, restrained, not by the enemy on distant battlefields, but by those sworn to uphold the law at home. Her breath caught, but she refused to show weakness. The injustice was suffocating, yet she remained a pillar of strength. The indignity of the moment was compounded by the knowledge that this was not about her actions, but about the power Wade wielded, unchecked, a power abused because of who she was, not what she had done. Maya's eyes flicked to Emily, whose steady gaze was a lifeline. The young woman's quiet documentation was a beacon of hope amid the dark storm. Camille stepped forward, voice shaking slightly. "Chief Lawson, please." "She hasn't done anything wrong." Wade's glare shifted to Camille, but did not falter. "Step back. This is official business." The handcuffs clicked shut. The cold bite against Maya's skin was a physical reminder of a deeper wound, the systemic failure that allowed such abuses to happen unchecked. Maya's heart pounded, but her voice remained clear. "You're making a mistake. This won't end well for you." As Wade guided her towards the door, Maya's mind replayed countless stories she'd heard from other Black Americans. Stories of power misused, of trust betrayed by those meant to protect. She thought of friends who had been stopped for no reason, arrested, without cause, their dignity stripped away by a system that failed them. This was not just a personal attack. It was a manifestation of a broader, ingrained problem. The unchecked authority that Wade displayed was a symptom of a system that too often prioritized control over justice. When power goes unchallenged, it breeds abuse. And in communities like Cedar Grove, such abuses were all too common, hidden behind a veil of silence and fear. Maya understood this well. She had fought battles overseas, but the war at home was insidious and unrelenting. It was fought in moments like these, in quiet diners, on ordinary streets, in the eyes of those who wielded power without accountability. Her arrest was a stark example of this dynamic. Wade's decision was not based on law or fairness, but on prejudice and a need to assert dominance. It was a mistake born of arrogance and ignorance, one that would have consequences far beyond this evening. As the door closed behind them, muffling the shocked gasps of the onlookers Maya held onto. One truth, the fight was far from over. This moment, painful and unjust as it was, would fuel her resolve to challenge the system, to demand accountability, and to inspire change. Inside her, the fire of resistance burned brighter. She was more than a victim. She was a warrior, ready to stand not just for herself, but for every person silenced by abuse of power. And in the face of injustice, that was a strength no handcuff could ever bind. Emily stood frozen for a moment, phone trembling slightly in her hands as she watched Wade Lawson's firm grip on Maya Carter's wrists. The cold metal of the handcuffs clicked shut with a sound that echoed louder than any shout, louder than the murmurs rippling through the diner. But inside Emily's chest, a different kind of noise rose, a fierce determination mixed with a thread of fear. Her fingers steadied, and with a resolve that belied her 16 years, she lifted the phone and began recording. Every second mattered, every detail. The tense expressions, the cold authority in Wade's eyes, Maya's composed but unwavering resistance, all captured in pixelated clarity, a digital testament to the unfolding injustice. Emily's heart pounded. She knew the risks. Wade Lawson was no ordinary man. He was the chief of police, a figure of power in this tight-knit community. Recording him meant defying the unspoken rules that many had accepted for years. But her gut told her this was more than a choice. It was a responsibility. The camera became her weapon, the lens her shield. With each tap on the screen, she felt both vulnerable and empowered. She wasn't just a bystander anymore. She was a witness, a recorder of truth, in a moment where silence could have meant complicity. The weight of the moment pressed heavily on her young shoulders, but she refused to look away. The diner around her buzzed with a low hum of tension. Some patrons cast quick, wary glances at Emily, as if to warn her to stop. Others were too stunned or too fearful to intervene. Yet Emily held firm, knowing that this recording could change everything. She remembered seeing videos, online footage of injustices caught on camera, shared across social media platforms, sparking outrage, demanding accountability. Those clips had brought about change before. They had made the invisible visible. They had given voice to the voiceless. This was her chance to be part of that change. Emily's fingers danced over the screen, ensuring the angle was clear, the sound crisp. She whispered quietly to herself, "This needs to be seen. This needs to be known." In that moment, she understood the true power of modern technology, the ability to expose truth in real time, to hold authority accountable in ways previously unimaginable. Social media was no longer just a place for selfies and memes. It had become a battleground for justice, a platform where the oppressed could speak and the powerful could be challenged. Yet with that power came danger. Emily was painfully aware that Wade and others like him might retaliate. There could be social ostracism threats or worse. But her courage outweighed her fear. The idea that Maya's dignity, and by extension the dignity of many others, could be defended through her simple act of recording, gave her strength. She glanced back at Maya, who caught her eye for a brief moment, and nodded a silent thank you that resonated deeper than words. Emily's heart swelled with a mix of pride and purpose. This was no longer just a local incident. With a single upload, this video could travel across states, across the nation, igniting conversations, prompting investigations and inspiring countless others to stand up. As Wade roughly led Maya out of the diner, Emily continued filming, capturing every detail, the grim faces, the hushed whispers, the palpable fear. She vowed that Maya's story would not be erased, not tonight. Later, when the video streamed live on Emily's social media feed, comments flooded in voices of outrage, solidarity, and calls for justice. It became a rallying cry, a digital spark igniting a broader movement. Emily's bravery was a testament to the new age of activism, where ordinary people wielded extraordinary influence through the power of technology. It was a reminder that change often begins with one person daring to speak up, and sometimes with one small camera held steady in the face of injustice. The atmosphere inside Camille's diner shifted palpably as Maya was led out in handcuffs. A heavy silence fell over the patrons, a silence that was far from peaceful. It was a silence thick with discomfort, confusion, and unspoken questions. People's eyes darted nervously around the room, avoiding direct contact with each other, as if they feared acknowledging the gravity of what had just unfolded. Some customers quickly turned their attention back to their meals, feigning indifference. They shoved their plates forward, picking at their food with distracted fingers. Others stared blankly at the coffee cups in front of them, hands wrapped tightly around the warmth, but hearts clearly elsewhere. There were those who exchanged quiet, furtive glances, whispers brushing the air, but never quite forming into voices loud enough to challenge the moment. The young boy sitting near the window clung tightly to his mother's hand, his wide eyes reflecting a mixture of fear and bewilderment. She squeezed his hand reassuringly, but remained silent, perhaps unsure of what to say, or afraid of what speaking might invite. The collective quiet felt oppressive, a heavy weight that settled on every shoulder. It was a familiar tableau, one that repeated itself countless times across the country. The uncomfortable truth that many communities, when confronted with injustice, respond with silence. Not always from agreement, but often from fear, helplessness, or resignation. This silence, however, carries its own complicity, a quiet consent that allows injustice to continue unchecked. Maya, even as she was escorted away, could sense the invisible barrier that silence created. She had experienced it before, the collective gaze that looks away rather than confronts the ugly realities beneath the surface. It was easier for many to pretend the problem did not exist than to risk conflict or discomfort. Her mind flashed to other stories she had heard headlines that recounted similar scenes. A bystander failing to speak up as a neighbor was mistreated. A crowd dispersing rather than intervening when confronted with wrongdoing. The pattern was painfully clear. Silence often became the unseen accomplice to oppression, but silence could be broken. Maya believed that every voice raised, every story told, chipped away at that wall of complacency. The first step toward justice was acknowledgement, recognition that a wrong had been done, and that it demanded a response. In the diner, a few brave souls met Maya's eyes as she was taken away. Their faces were etched with silent apology and unspoken promises. They knew they had a choice to continue the cycle of quiet acceptance or to find the courage to speak out. Camille, standing behind the counter, caught Emily's eye. Without words, they shared a moment of understanding, a commitment that this story would not be buried in silence. Emily's phone was still recording, capturing the faces of those who dared not speak and those who would soon find their voices. This moment was a microcosm of a larger truth that communities must confront their own silence if change is to be possible. To be silent in the face of injustice is to be complicit, whether intentionally or not. The path forward demands courage, not just from those who suffer injustice, but from all who witness it. Maya's journey was far from over, but she carried with her the hope that her courage and the courage of others like Emily and Camille could awaken a community from its slumber. Only through collective acknowledgement and action could the tides of injustice be turned. In the quiet aftermath, the diner was no longer just a place for food. It had become a stage for awakening, a reminder that silence is a choice, and that choice carries profound consequences. The challenge now was for everyone to find their voice before the silence became too loud to ignore. As Maya sat in the sterile holding cell, the cold metal bench beneath her felt unforgiving, but it was nothing compared to the weight pressing on her mind. The flashing images of her past played behind her closed eyes, moments etched into her memory, like scars, reminders of battles fought long before today's confrontation. These were not just the battles of war zones overseas. These were the silent wars waged every day against bias, against the unseen chains of prejudice that sought to bind her at every turn. She remembered vividly the time she was stopped at an airport security checkpoint a few years ago. Dressed in her full military uniform, carrying the insignia of her rank, she had expected the usual respect afforded to officers. Instead, she was met with suspicion. A security agent. His eyes narrowing as he glanced at her ID, demanded to search her luggage thoroughly. The search was invasive, his tone bordering on accusatory. "You're making this difficult," he said bluntly. Maya remained calm, explaining her credentials. The purpose of her travel. But the scrutiny never eased. The crowd around them watched, but said nothing. The sting of being singled out because of her skin was sharp, but she held her head high, knowing that yielding to anger would only fuel the stereotypes. Another time during a high-level military briefing, Maya had presented a strategic plan she had developed. Her voice was clear, her points concise, backed by data and experience. Yet as she spoke, a senior officer repeatedly interrupted her, dismissing her ideas with offhand remarks. "Let the real experts talk." He sneered once, a comment that hung in the air like a poison. The room shifted uncomfortably, some nodding, others averting their eyes. Maya held her ground, countering with facts and reason, but the message was clear. Her voice was not fully welcome. Her authority questioned not by her competence, but by the color of her skin. There was also the memory of a training exercise on a remote base, where Maya was the commanding officer. Despite her rank, a group of her subordinates treated her with subtle disdain, questioning orders with barely concealed skepticism. During a debrief, a white officer remarked, "It's different following orders from a woman, especially one who looks like you." Maya had felt the sharp sting of exclusion, the sense of isolation that came from being the other in a room full of peers. Each of these experiences left a mark, layering onto one another, like sediment, creating a foundation of resilience. Maya had learned early on that survival depended on more than strength. It required a steely resolve, a mastery over emotions, and an unshakable belief in one's worth. Yet it wasn't just the external battles that defined her. It was the internal struggle to maintain dignity and hope in a world that often sought to diminish her. Every time she faced prejudice, she reminded herself that she carried not just her own dreams, but the hopes of those who came before and those who would follow. Maya's endurance was forged through these repeated confrontations with discrimination. She understood that the path to equality was neither smooth nor swift, but marred with obstacles demanding courage and persistence. It was a journey that required not only confronting the biases of others, but also healing the wounds within. These recollections brought a bittersweet clarity. The fight against injustice was ongoing, but so was the power to overcome. Maya's past was a testament to the strength born from hardship, a strength she drew upon now, sitting in that cell, ready to face whatever came next. The lesson was clear. True leadership was not measured solely by rank or accolades, but by the ability to rise above prejudice, to persist with integrity, and to inspire change through unwavering resolve. Maya embodied that lesson, a living proof that the human spirit can transcend even the deepest scars. As the hours passed in that cold room, Maya's mind remained anchored in those memories, not as burdens, but as pillars supporting her unyielding will. She was more than the sum of the injustices she had endured. She was a warrior of resilience, a beacon of hope for those still fighting their own silent battles. And with that strength, she prepared to reclaim her story, to turn pain into power, and to lead not just with authority, but with the enduring courage that had carried her through every challenge. The sterile light of the holding cell flickered faintly overhead as Maya Carter pulled out her phone. Her fingers hovered for a moment, steadying themselves against the tremor that threatened to surface. This wasn't just another call. It was a lifeline, one that could alter the course of the night, perhaps even change everything. She dialed a number she'd memorized long ago, a direct line to someone high up in the military hierarchy, a mentor and ally who understood both her struggles and her strength. The connection rang, each tone echoing like a heartbeat in the stillness. On the other end, the familiar voice answered. "Maya, is that you?" The relief was palpable, mixed with urgency. "It's me." Maya replied, her voice low, but resolute. "I need help. I'm being detained, wrongfully arrested." The voice on the line was steady, commanding respect, even through the static. "Where are you? What happened?" Maya took a deep breath, recounting the details succinctly, yet with an undercurrent of controlled emotion. She described the encounter with Wade Lawson, the accusations without cause, the unlawful detainment. Each word was a plea, but also a declaration, a reminder that she was not alone. As the conversation unfolded, Maya felt a shift, a tide turning in her favor. The person on the other end promised immediate action, mobilizing contacts to intervene swiftly. The power of that network was immense, a testament to the importance of having allies in positions of influence. This call was more than a simple request for assistance. It was a strategic move, a beacon of hope cutting through the darkness of uncertainty. Maya knew that in moments like these, the strength of official channels and support systems could be the difference between injustice prevailing and truth triumphing. Her heart pounded with a mixture of anticipation and cautious optimism. She was aware that no victory was guaranteed, that the path ahead was fraught with challenges. But this call ignited a spark, a promise that the machinery of justice could be set into motion, armed with the weight of authority and accountability. As she ended the call, Maya felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road was still long, but she was no longer fighting alone. The power of connection of a well-placed ally was a vital weapon in the battle against systemic wrongs. In that fleeting moment within the cold confines of a holding cell, Maya Carter harnessed the hope and power embedded in that call, a call that could rewrite the story, not just for her, but for countless others who relied on courage, truth, and the unbreakable bonds of support. The call Maya had made resonated far beyond the confines of the small holding cell. Within hours, its impact rippled through the corridors of power, mobilizing a swift response from the military command. The direct line she had used connected her to a network equipped to counteract abuses of power and safeguard those unjustly targeted. Not long after, a team of military legal officers and investigators arrived in Cedar Grove. Their presence was immediate and authoritative, a clear sign that Maya's case was no longer just a local matter, but one commanding attention from the highest echelons. The group was composed of seasoned professionals, legal experts, human rights advocates, and military officers, trained to navigate the delicate balance between authority and justice. The process began with a thorough review of Maya's detention. The investigators requested all documentation related to the arrest incident reports, witness statements, and the official rationale Wade Lawson and his department offered. It was a meticulous examination underscoring the military's commitment to accountability, even when confronting the actions of local law enforcement. Maya watched the proceedings with cautious hope. The atmosphere was charged with a sense of urgency and determination. She understood that this legal scrutiny represented a crucial counterbalance to the unchecked power that had been exercised against her. The military command's intervention was more than procedural formality. It was a statement. It highlighted the ability of institutional structures, when functioning correctly, to check and challenge abuses of authority. In a system where power can so easily be misused, mechanisms for oversight and redress are vital. Throughout the investigation, Maya encountered a team dedicated not just to her case, but to the principle of justice. They conducted interviews with witnesses, including Emily and Camille, ensuring that every perspective was heard. They examined body camera footage, reviewed the video Emily had recorded, and cross-referenced all accounts to build an objective understanding of the events. This comprehensive approach illuminated the stark contrast between military discipline and the questionable conduct displayed by the local police chief. The military's chain of command and legal oversight provided Maya with protections unavailable in many civilian contexts. Protections that could hold wrongdoers accountable and protect victims. As the inquiry unfolded, Maya reflected on the broader implications. The military's readiness to act on her behalf was a beacon of hope, demonstrating that even in deeply flawed systems, there are avenues for justice. This legal check was essential, not just for her, but for anyone facing similar abuses. The process also underscored the importance of institutional accountability. The military's swift response served as a reminder that power must be balanced by responsibility, and that no individual or department is above the law. Maya's case became a poignant example of how coordinated legal intervention and advocacy can protect individuals from unchecked authority. It was a testament to the power of established procedures, clear jurisdictional boundaries, and dedicated oversight bodies. While the road ahead was still uncertain, the presence of the military legal team offered Maya a renewed sense of security. She was no longer isolated. She had allies equipped with the expertise and authority to challenge injustice head-on. The lesson was clear. Safeguarding rights requires more than courage. It requires robust systems and vigilant enforcement. Through the combined efforts of individuals and institutions, the balance between power and justice can be maintained. In the quiet moments after the investigation began, Maya felt a surge of resolve. The legal check from the military command was not just a shield. It was a call to continue fighting, knowing that the tools of justice were within reach. Her journey was far from over, but with this support, Maya was prepared to confront the challenges ahead, armed not only with personal strength, but with the power of law and accountability firmly on her side. The cold metal bench was unforgiving beneath Maya Carter's frame as she sat alone in the dimly lit holding cell. The walls closed in around her, sterile and bare, an oppressive reminder of her current predicament. Yet despite the chill seeping through her uniform and the isolation weighing heavily on her spirit, Maya's mind was a sanctuary of fierce determination. In the solitude of that confined space, Maya felt a profound mix of emotions ripple beneath her calm exterior. There was loneliness, an aching solitude that clung to her like a shadow, magnified by the silence and the absence of familiar faces. No one here knew her story, her battles, or the scars she carried beneath her skin and within her heart. Here she was reduced to a number, a case file, a detainee, in a system that too often failed those it was meant to protect. But within that solitude, there also burned an unyielding flame of hope and resilience. Maya's faith in justice was not blind. It was forged through years of experience tempered by countless encounters with adversity. She had learned that the path to truth was seldom easy or swift, but it was always worth fighting for. Her thoughts drifted to the injustice that had brought her here, the wrongful arrest, the baseless accusations, the misuse of authority by a man sworn to serve and protect. The sting of betrayal was sharp, but it did not break her. Instead, it steeled her resolve. Maya knew that surrendering to despair would only serve her oppressors. She reflected on the battles she had fought not only on foreign soil, but within the walls of institutions resistant to change. Each challenge had tested her will, each setback a lesson in endurance. Maya understood that true power came from within, from an inner strength that no chain or cell could contain. The quiet hum of the fluorescent lights overhead was a steady backdrop to her reflections. She breathed deeply, centering herself. This was her moment to draw on the reserves of courage that had carried her through storms before. The external silence was deceiving. Inside, her mind raced with strategies, plans, and the unshakable belief that justice would prevail. Loneliness, she realized, was a crucible in which character was forged. It stripped away distractions, forcing one to confront the core of their being. For Maya, this confrontation was not with fear or doubt, but with clarity, a reaffirmation of her mission and her worth. She thought of those who believed in her, the allies who had already begun mobilizing support, the community watching and waiting, and the younger generation like Emily, whose courage in capturing the truth had sparked a beacon of hope. Their faith in her was a lifeline, a reminder that she was not truly alone. As the hours stretched on, Maya's gaze shifted to the small window near the ceiling, where a sliver of moonlight seeped through. It cast a pale glow on her face, illuminating the lines of determination etched there. That light, faint but persistent, symbolized the hope that no darkness could extinguish. Maya knew that the fight ahead would demand more than physical endurance. It would require mental fortitude, patience, and an unwavering commitment to truth. Her internal battle was as crucial as any external confrontation, a test of spirit that would define not just the outcome of this night, but the legacy she would leave behind. In that lonely cell, Maya Carter embraced her inner strength, the most powerful weapon in her arsenal. It was a force that no handcuff could bind, no wall could confine, and no injustice could diminish. Her story was far from over, and with every steady breath, every silent heartbeat, she prepared to rise stronger, fiercer, and ready to reclaim her rightful place in the light. The days following Maya Carter's arrest brought an unexpected shift in the atmosphere of Cedar Grove. a shift most evident not among the townsfolk, but within the hardened heart of Wade Lawson. For years, Wade had worn his authority like armor, a steadfast enforcer of the status quo. Yet beneath that facade of control and confidence, something had begun to unravel. Late one evening, alone in the dimly lit confines of his office, Wade sat hunched over his desk. The room was silent except for the faint ticking of a clock on the wall, a rhythmic reminder of time slipping away. The weight of recent events pressed heavily on his mind. He stared blankly at the wall, but his thoughts were far from idle. Images flickered behind his closed eyelids. Snapshots of Maya poised and dignified in the diner, the unwavering look in her eyes, the voice that had challenged him without raising volume or anger. These memories gnawed at him, stirring a turmoil he could no longer ignore. For the first time, Wade confronted a truth he had long suppressed, that his actions were not merely professional duties, but a response laced with prejudice and fear. The realization unsettled him deeply, tearing at the foundation of the man he thought himself to be. He reached for a photograph on his desk, a picture of his younger self, once hopeful, brimming with ideals about justice and protection. The man in that photo seemed distant, almost foreign. Wade realized that somewhere along the way, the lines between enforcing the law and wielding power had blurred. The badge he wore had become a tool, not just of authority, but of control rooted in bias. The confrontation with Maya had cracked his carefully constructed armor. Her strength and integrity had forced him to see himself through a harsher lens, revealing insecurities and fears he had buried deep. He grappled with guilt. Guilt, not just for the wrongful arrest, but for the broader complicity in a system that marginalized voices like hers. In the quiet of that night, Wade experienced a profound internal reckoning. It was uncomfortable, unsettling, and yet necessary. He understood that change demanded more than just surface apologies or hollow statements. It required a fundamental shift, a willingness to face uncomfortable truths and alter behaviors entrenched over decades. The next day, Wade sought out a trusted colleague, a mentor from his early days in law enforcement, who had always urged him toward fairness and reflection. Their conversation was raw and honest. Wade admitted his failings, his doubts, and the haunting impact of Maya's unwavering courage. The mentor listened without judgment, encouraging Wade to take responsibility not just for his actions, but for the culture he represented. This moment marked the beginning of a slow transformation. Wade recognized that people are not static. They possess the capacity to change when confronted with the stark realities of their impact on others. Maya's strength had ignited a spark within him, challenging his preconceptions and forcing him toward growth. Wade's journey was neither linear nor easy. He wrestled with old habits and societal conditioning, striving to reconcile his role as an enforcer of the law with a newfound commitment to justice and equity. His acknowledgement of error was a critical step not only for his redemption, but as a signal to the community that change was possible. The story of Wade Lawson serves as a powerful reminder that beneath the surface, every individual carries complexities and contradictions. The capacity for change resides within all of us, especially when faced with truths that disrupt comfortable narratives. As Wade grappled with his conscience, he began to see Maya not as an adversary, but as a catalyst, a reflection of the justice and dignity he once aspired to uphold. His confession, tentative yet sincere, opened a door to healing and progress, underscoring the profound impact of courage in confronting not just external battles, but internal ones as well. In the unfolding narrative of Cedar Grove, Wade's transformation illuminated a hopeful truth that even those who have faltered can choose a path toward understanding and restitution. Change, though difficult, is always within reach when met with honesty and humility. And so, as the days passed, Wade Lawson began to rewrite his own story, not as a symbol of oppression, but as a man willing to learn to grow and to stand on the right side of history. The moment Emily hit record, she couldn't have known the ripple effect her actions would unleash, not just within the walls of Camille's diner, but across the community of Cedar Grove and beyond. The video she captured was raw, unfiltered truth, a stark testament to the injustice unfolding before her eyes. As the footage made its way into the hands of local news outlets and rapidly spread through social media channels, it ignited a wave of reaction that transcended the small town's borders. At first, the video circulated quietly among friends and neighbors, shared through private messages and community groups. But the raw power of the visuals, a respected military officer being handcuffed without cause, made it impossible to ignore. The footage was undeniable, capturing not only the event, but the emotions, the tension, the stark imbalance of power on full display. Each frame spoke volumes, offering viewers an unmediated glimpse into a reality often hidden behind closed doors and official reports. Emily watched as the video's reach grew exponentially. Comments poured in outraged support calls for justice. Strangers from distant states expressed solidarity. Activists flagged the case, connecting it to larger movements addressing systemic racism and police misconduct. The clip was shared not as a fleeting moment, but as a symbol of a persistent problem demanding urgent attention. This was the transformative power of visual evidence. Unlike words or hearsay, images possess a visceral immediacy that bypasses skepticism and touches the core of public consciousness. They disrupt denial-challenge narratives and compel audiences to confront uncomfortable truths. In this way, Emily's video became more than a recording. It became a catalyst for awareness and action. The impact on public discourse was swift and profound. Local authorities found themselves under scrutiny, pressured to respond transparently. Community leaders convened meetings, advocacy groups mobilized, legal experts weighed in. The conversation around the incident broadened, encompassing not only Maya's personal ordeal, but the systemic issues it reflected. Historically, video evidence has played a crucial role in bringing injustices to light. The footage of Rodney King's beating in 1991 sparked national outrage and a reckoning with police brutality. More recently, videos of George Floyd's murder galvanized global protests and legislative discussions. These instances illustrate how visual documentation can pierce through apathy, galvanizing communities to demand accountability. In Cedar Grove, Emily's video followed this legacy. It challenged the silence, forcing a reckoning with uncomfortable realities. The undeniable proof of misconduct made it harder for officials to dismiss Maya's claims or sideline the issue. It also empowered citizens to speak out, emboldened by the knowledge that truth was now publicly affirmed. Moreover, the video served as a protective measure for Maya. Its existence created a layer of accountability that made further abuse more difficult. Wade Lawson and others knew their actions were being watched, recorded, and could be used against them. This shift in power dynamics underscored the role of technology in leveling the playing field. The social media storm also fostered a sense of community solidarity. People organized vigils, fundraisers, and awareness campaigns. Conversations that had been whispered behind closed doors moved into the open, creating space for dialogue and healing. The video was not just evidence, it was a rallying cry. Emily's courage, combined with the power of her recording, demonstrated how individual actions could ripple outward to influence broader societal change. It reinforced the critical lesson that documentation is a vital tool in the fight for justice, transforming personal experiences into collective awareness and ultimately reform. As the video continued to circulate, it served as a reminder that technology wielded responsibly and courageously holds immense potential to confront entrenched injustices. In a world saturated with information, authentic visual evidence cuts through the noise, compelling us to see, to feel, and to act. Through Emily's lens, the truth had found a voice, and with that voice came power, the power to challenge, to expose, and to inspire change. The community center's conference room was packed to capacity. Every seat filled, every corner, occupied by anxious faces, buzzing whispers, and flashing cameras. The air was thick with anticipation and unease as local law enforcement prepared to address the storm unleashed by the viral video capturing Maya Carter's arrest. It was a pivotal moment, a chance to mend fractured trust or deepen the divide. At the front of the room stood Chief Wade Lawson, flanked by his legal counsel and senior officers. His usual confident demeanor was tempered by the weight of scrutiny. Reporters from local and national outlets crowded the front microphones, poised cameras rolling. The room pulsed with a mix of skepticism and demand for accountability. Wade cleared his throat. Stepping up to the podium, his voice steady but guarded filled the room. "Thank you all for coming," he began. Glancing briefly at his notes, "We acknowledge the concerns raised by the recent incident involving Colonel Maya Carter. Our officers acted in accordance with protocol based on the information available at the time." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Questions and objections hung in the air like electricity. Reporters exchanged looks, pens ready, voices eager to cut through the carefully crafted statements. One journalist spoke up, voice sharp. "Chief Lawson, the video clearly shows no cause for arrest. How do you justify this action?" Wade's expression tightened. The situation was complex. Our officers had to make split-second decisions to ensure public safety. His words were measured defensive. "We are conducting an internal review and cooperating with the military investigation." Another reporter pressed, "Does that include accountability for any misuse of authority?" The chief's gaze flickered momentarily, betraying a flicker of discomfort. "We hold our officers to high standards. Any violations will be addressed." The tension in the room escalated as more pointed questions followed about training, use of force policies, community relations. Reporters pressed for transparency, for answers that went beyond rehearsed statements. Meanwhile, the public watching the live broadcast and streaming feeds reacted with frustration and outrage. Social media exploded with calls for justice, demands for independent investigations, and expressions of solidarity with Maya Carter. Behind the scenes, Camille and Emily monitored the coverage anxiously. Emily's video had sparked a fire that now blazed through every corner of Cedar Grove and beyond. The community's demand was clear. They wanted truth, accountability, and change. Wade's team, facing mounting pressure, struggled to maintain control of the narrative. Their defensive posture underscored a broader issue, the difficulty institutions face when confronting their own shortcomings openly. The press conference, intended to reassure, instead amplified distrust. It revealed the chasm between official messaging and community perception. This disconnect underscored the critical lesson: at the heart of the crisis, without genuine transparency and responsibility, trust erodes and legitimacy crumbles. Maya's supporters saw the event as a call to action, a reminder that the fight for justice required vigilance beyond any single incident. The public's response highlighted the power of collective voice in demanding change. In the end, the press conference was not just about explaining an incident. It became a moment that exposed systemic challenges and the urgent need for reform. It was a stark reminder that leadership must be rooted in honesty and accountability to rebuild faith in institutions. As the crowd dispersed, the echoes of the event lingered, a potent symbol that true trust is earned through openness, humility, and a commitment to justice that transcends words. The road ahead was fraught, but the conversation had begun. And in that conversation lay the seeds of transformation, if only those in power chose to listen. The aftermath of the press conference left the community divided, simmering with frustration, hope, and a renewed call for justice. For Maya Carter, the battle had only just begun. Freed but far from cleared, she knew that the path toward justice would demand every ounce of her strength, resilience, and unwavering conviction. Determined not to let her story be silenced or twisted, Maya reached out to a trusted civil rights attorney, known for taking on cases of police misconduct. The lawyer Amelia Reed was a fierce advocate with a reputation for tenacity and compassion. From their very first meeting, a bond formed between them, rooted in a shared commitment to hold the powerful accountable and to give a voice to those too often marginalized. Together they began navigating the labyrinthine legal system, a terrain fraught with obstacles. Each step revealed the entrenched challenges faced by those confronting systemic discrimination, from procedural delays and bureaucratic roadblocks to subtle forms of resistance within institutions. The journey was arduous and at times disheartening. Maya found herself grappling not only with legal complexities, but also with the emotional toll of reliving the trauma. The constant scrutiny, the barrage of media attention, and the weight of representing a broader cause often left her drained. Yet the unwavering support from her legal team and the growing network of human rights organizations buoyed her spirit. These organizations brought expertise, resources, and moral support. They helped frame Maya's case not as an isolated incident, but as part of a larger pattern of systemic abuse and racial injustice. Through workshops, advocacy campaigns, and community forums, they amplified her story, transforming individual pain into collective action. The fight was more than courtroom battles. It was a social movement demanding cultural change. Maya attended rallies, spoke at events, and shared her experiences, candidly inspiring others to speak out against injustice. Each act of courage chipped away at the walls of silence and indifference that had long protected abuses of power. Despite setbacks, including dismissive responses from some officials and attempts to discredit her, Maya remained steadfast. The legal process was slow and complex, but her resolve never wavered. She understood that dismantling systemic inequality required persistent effort, resilience in the face of opposition, and solidarity from the community. Community members rallied around Maya, organizing fundraisers, petitions, and awareness campaigns. Their collective voice became a force, pushing for transparency and reform. This support not only provided practical assistance, but reinforced Maya's conviction that she was not alone. Through this journey, Maya learned that seeking justice was not a solitary endeavor, but a collective struggle. It demanded allies. Lawyers, activists, neighbors who would stand together to challenge injustice and demand accountability. Her story became a beacon for others facing similar battles, illustrating that change, though slow and often painful, was possible when individuals unite with courage and purpose. Maya's pursuit of justice was a testament to the power of perseverance and community. It underscored a vital truth: that breaking down the walls of discrimination and abuse requires relentless determination, supported by a network of unwavering allies. As the legal case progressed, Maya's hope grew, not just for personal vindication, but for a future where justice was truly accessible to all. Her journey illuminated the path forward, a path defined by resilience, solidarity, and the unyielding fight for equality. In the face of a system resistant to change, Maya Carter's story became a powerful reminder that justice is not given. It is demanded, fought for, and won through the combined strength of individuals and communities committed to making a difference. Grove began to shift. What was once an undercurrent of unease slowly bubbled to the surface, igniting a growing awareness among the town's residents. Maya Carter's story had pierced the veil of silence that had long protected the status quo, awakening a community that could no longer turn away from the truth. It started quietly. Small conversations sparked in kitchens at church gatherings, in coffee shops like Camille's Diner. Neighbors who had once avoided discussing uncomfortable topics found themselves confronting the realities of injustice and discrimination. "Did you see that video?" someone would ask. "What do you think happened to Maya?" another would respond. These exchanges, tentative at first, grew bolder with each retelling. Local leaders previously silent or cautious began hosting forums and town hall meetings. They opened the floor to honest dialogue, inviting residents to voice their concerns, fears, and hopes. These gatherings were raw, sometimes tense, but fundamentally transformative. They broke down barriers of misunderstanding and sparked empathy where indifference had prevailed. Young people like Emily played a crucial role in this awakening. Their voices, amplified by social media and fueled by a passion for justice, challenged older generations to reconsider long-held beliefs. Schools incorporated discussions about systemic racism and community responsibility into their curriculums, planting seeds for a more informed and compassionate future. As awareness grew, so did action. Peaceful protests formed in the town square, drawing hundreds of residents united in their call for accountability and reform. Signs waved, high chants echoed through the streets, and a palpable energy filled the air, one of solidarity and resilience. These demonstrations weren't just about Maya Carter. They were about the broader fight against injustice that had touched too many lives for too long. They reflected a community ready to stand up, to be seen and heard, and to demand change. The media began covering these events, bringing national attention to Cedar Grove's awakening. Stories of the town's transformation inspired other communities facing similar struggles, creating a ripple effect of awareness and advocacy. Throughout this journey, Maya remained a symbol of resilience and hope. Her courage had sparked a movement, but it was the collective awakening of the community that fueled lasting change. Historical parallels emerged as residents drew inspiration from past social movements. The civil rights marches, labor struggles, and advocacy for women's rights were cited as examples of how sustained community engagement could reshape society. Cedar Grove's path mirrored these legacies, proving that even the smallest towns could be crucibles of powerful change. Institutional reforms followed. Local government officials, pressured by public demand, implemented new policies focused on transparency, community policing, and anti-discrimination training. Police departments began dialogues with residents, fostering relationships built on trust rather than fear. These changes, while incremental, marked a significant departure from previous complacency. They were tangible steps toward healing and justice, affirming the community's commitment to progress. Maya's journey was no longer solitary. It was intertwined with the awakening of an entire town. Her struggle became a catalyst for collective reflection and action, reminding everyone that true change begins when a community chooses to confront its past and work toward a better future. The story of Cedar Grove was still unfolding, but the awakening had begun. And in that awakening lay the promise of a more just, compassionate, and inclusive tomorrow. The day had arrived. Under the wide blue sky of Cedar Grove, in the heart of the town square, a crowd gathered, a diverse sea of faces, united by a shared purpose. The air buzzed with anticipation, the energy palpable, as people from all walks of life came together to witness a moment both deeply personal and profoundly universal. At the center of this gathering stood Maya Carter, no longer just a woman who had faced injustice, but a symbol of resilience, hope, and the power of truth. As she stepped onto the makeshift stage, the murmurs quieted, and all eyes turned to her. The sunlight caught the silver stars on her uniform, gleaming like beacons. Her posture was tall, her gaze steady, reflecting a journey marked by struggle, but defined by unbreakable will. She breathed in the collective strength of the crowd, their hopes, their pain, their determination, and spoke. "My story is not just my own." Maya began, her voice clear and unwavering. "It is the story of countless individuals who have been silenced, marginalized, and denied justice. It is the story of a community that refused to look away. And it is a call to all of us, those who believe in fairness, in dignity, in the power of standing up for what is right." She recounted her experiences, the wrongful arrest, the pain of being judged not by her actions, but by the color of her skin. She spoke of the loneliness, the battles fought in silence, and the unyielding hope that carried her through. Her words resonated deeply, echoing the unspoken struggles many in the crowd had faced in their own lives. Maya's story was a testament to the strength that emerges when one refuses to be broken. But more than that, it was a rallying cry for change. She emphasized that justice is not a distant ideal. It is a responsibility shared by every individual, every community, every institution. "Justice will never come if we remain silent," she said, her voice rising with passion. "Each of us holds a voice, a light that can pierce the darkness of injustice. When we speak up, when we stand together, we become unstoppable. We become the change." The crowd erupted in applause, their cheers a powerful affirmation of Maya's message. Among them were young faces inspired by her courage, elders moved by the possibility of progress, and allies committed to building a fairer future. Maya closed with a vision, a future where dignity is not a privilege, but a right, where power is wielded with responsibility, where every person, regardless of background, is seen, heard, and respected. As she stepped down, the sense of hope was tangible, a collective resolve that this moment was not an end, but a beginning. Maya's journey illuminated a path forward, a path marked by courage, unity, and the relentless pursuit of justice. Her story reminded all who listened that change is born from the courage to speak out and the strength to persevere. It was a call to be the light in the darkness, the voice for the voiceless, the catalyst for a better tomorrow. In the heart of Cedar Grove, under that endless sky, a community awakened. And with Maya Carter leading the way, the promise of justice was no longer a distant dream, but a living, breathing reality. The crowd's applause still echoed through the town square as Maya's final words hung in the air, charged with urgency and undeniable truth. Before stepping away, she turned toward the camera, her eyes locking with the viewers beyond the crowd. If you believe in justice and dignity, and the power of your voice, then don't stay silent. Subscribe, stay informed, and be part of the change. Because the real danger isn't the injustice we see, it's the silence that lets it live. Her words hit like a thunderclap, a stark reminder that complacency is the enemy of progress. Justice demands action, and it starts with you. Don't watch history repeat itself. Stand up. Speak out. Because silence is complicity, and the cost of ignoring it could be your own freedom.